Endemism is when a species is native and unique to a defined geographic location and not found naturally anywhere else. I recently made a video about the endemic species of the United States, and I got several requests from viewers and patrons to make the same video about Europe. So in this video, we're taking a look at one endemic species of animal, plant, or fungus from each European country, provided that I was able to find one. Just like with the video I did about the US, we're only looking at organisms with full species status, meaning no subspecies are going to be included in the video. I'm also including transcontinental countries like Turkey and Russia, as well as the Caucasus countries, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Let's take a look at Europe's amazing endemic species. In southern Albania lives fang-fang spurlin, a tiny freshwater fish found only in the Osum River. Dr. Fang-Fang Kullander, a Chinese-born ichthyologist who worked at the Swedish Museum of Natural History, played an instrumental role in sorting out the taxonomy of spurlin fishes, and this species was named in her honor. It prefers clear, fast-flowing water in shallow, stony channels, and its entire range is limited to this single drainage. It reaches about 8 centimeters and was described in 2010 after being overlooked within the confusing complex of similar-looking spurlins from the region. Because it occupies such a small stretch of habitat, its future depends heavily on clean water and consistent flow in the Osum. Andorra is one of the smallest countries in the world, covering less than 470 square kilometers up in the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of France and Spain, so I didn't expect to find an endemic species here. But in 1992, a new species of cockroach was described from Andorra, and it hasn't been recorded anywhere else. Philodromica andorrana is a small forest cockroach that lives in cool, humid woodland environments where it hides in damp leaf litter, under stones, and in rotting logs. It's an easily overlooked species because it spends nearly its entire life tucked away in these shaded microhabitats at higher elevations. The mountains of northern Armenia are home to the Armenian birch mouse, a tiny nocturnal rodent with long hind legs and a tail that helps it balance as it moves through the undergrowth. It's found in mixed forests of coniferous and broadleaf trees in an area upstream of the river Marmarik. The first specimens were recorded in the vicinity of the village of Hankavan in Kotyk province on Pambak Ridge, but they have since disappeared from there. They're now only known to survive on Sevan Pass, above 2,000 meters in elevation. This species is so rare that it appears on the Zoological Society of London's EDGE list, and is considered to be one of the mammals most at risk of extinction in the near future. The IUCN lists it as critically endangered. In the limestone Alps of eastern Austria grows the alpine pink, a small mountain flower with vivid magenta petals that forms low cushions on exposed rocky slopes. It only occurs naturally within Austria, mostly in high-elevation calcareous habitats where the soil is thin and the winters are harsh. It blooms in short bursts during the alpine summer, flowering in June, July, and August, adding some bright color to the otherwise stark gray rock faces and scree fields. Two relatively recently described species of golden ring dragonfly are endemic to Azerbaijan. In the low mountain forests in the north of the country lives Cordulagaster plagionix, and in the subalpine zone of Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic lives Cordulagaster nakhichevanica. Both species are marked with bold black and yellow bands, and they're restricted to areas around clear, fast forest streams and shaded spring runs in the foothills of the Greater Caucasus, where the water stays cold and clean through the summer. Scientists noticed that these populations had unique body and eye coloration, and when they examined their internal morphology, they confirmed that these animals were in fact distinct from the similar-looking blue-eyed golden ring, giving Azerbaijan two newly recognized endemic species. In Belarus lives Dorofeev's sculpin, a small, bottom-dwelling fish that occurs only in the upper Dnieper river system. It hides among stony and gravel substrates in cool water, usually staying pressed close to the stream bed rather than swimming up in the water column. This species was only formally described in the 1970s, and today its known range is limited to a short stretch of headwater rivers and streams in the northern part of the country. In 1942, in the limestone caves of Liège province, Belgium, a species of beetle was discovered. The Lyle Cave ant-loving beetle is a tiny subterranean rove beetle known only from Lyle Cave near Annecy, and it's the only species of exclusively subterranean-dwelling beetle within the country. It spends its life in the dark of the cave system, unable to survive on the surface. The cave itself is protected and closed to the public, with access limited to research, which is one reason this beetle went unnoticed for so long. In the high mountains of central and northern Bosnia and Herzegovina grows the Bosnian lily, a wild lily with elegant yellow flowers that only occurs in the Dinaric Alps. It grows in open subalpine meadows and on sunny mountain slopes, sometimes in places where the soil layer is barely more than a thin covering over the limestone. It blooms in early summer and was once better known locally, but today it's considered rare in the wild. Historically, the flower has been an important symbol in the country, with the 6 yellow fleurs-de-lis on the country's coat of arms commonly regarded as a representation of the Bosnian lily, one of the country's few endemic flowering plants. In northern Bulgaria, in the upper reaches of the Vit River, lives the Vit sculpin, a small, bottom-dwelling freshwater fish found nowhere else. It stays close to the riverbed among the stones and gravel in cool, flowing water, and it's rarely seen unless someone is actively sampling the stream. It was only recognized as a distinct species in the early 21st century, when researchers realized that the sculpins in this section of the Danube drainage were morphologically distinct from other populations, both upstream and downstream. Today, it's known only from this one Bulgarian river system. Along Croatia's Dalmatian coast and nearby islands grows the Adriatic dwarf iris, a tiny bearded iris that was only described scientifically in 2002, despite blooming within sight of busy tourist routes. It's unusually variable, with flowers ranging from clear yellow to deep violet, sometimes even mixed shades on different plants just meters apart. It can be found in scattered coastal and island stands where grasses and wild sage share the slope. These habitats are considered at risk in Croatia's Red Book, and the Adriatic dwarf iris is now threatened with extinction. On the island nation of Cyprus lives the Cyprus whip snake, a slim and fast-moving snake found only here. It's most often found in the lowlands and foothills of the Troodos region, where it favors rocky scrub, open woodland, and sunlit slopes. It hunts lizards and small rodents during the day, and most of what we know about it has come from relatively few field observations, because while it is widespread on Cyprus, it's not particularly abundant. For many decades, its true status was unclear, but the species is now assessed as near threatened by the IUCN. Jewel beetles are often metallic and brightly colored, but in Czechia lives the Bohemian jewel beetle, a tiny olive-green metallic buprestid that breaks the mold. It measures between just 2 and 4 millimeters in length, and for decades it was thought to survive only on steep, south-facing steppe slopes in the Zatets region, where the larvae feed inside the wiry stems of just one species of plant. These sites are small and isolated, and many of the old steppe patches around Prague, where the Bohemian jewel beetle once lived, have already been lost. Thankfully, in 2010, the species was unexpectedly discovered in another south-facing slope inside the city limits of Prague itself, meaning that it's limited to 2 small patches of habitat. In western Denmark lives the Jutland bow-winged grasshopper. It looks almost identical to the ordinary bow-winged grasshopper found throughout northern Europe, but it has its own unique male courtship song, and it's genetically distinct. The species occupies sandy coastal heaths and dune systems along the North Sea side of Jutland, especially in warm, open patches of low heather. It wasn't formally recognized as a distinct species until the 2000s, when researchers studying male calling behavior realized that the Jutland population was something different, hiding in plain sight. On the Estonian island of Saaremaa grows the Saaremaa yellow rattle. It parasitizes the roots of neighboring grasses, tapping into them for extra nutrients, just like other yellow rattle species do. It flowers in June and July and is mostly limited to low, open grassland on thin, lime-rich soils close to the Baltic shore. Even within Estonia, it has a tiny distribution, tied to only a handful of coastal fen areas on this one island, and it's threatened by habitat drainage and meadow abandonment. For Finland, I needed to talk about a species that I actually just recently covered in another video, the Saimaa ringed seal. It was only recognized as a species in 2025, and it's one of only 2 seal species that spend their entire lives in fresh water. They live in Lake Saimaa, a huge inland lake in the southeast of the country. They haul out on rocky islands, and in the winter they dig snow caves where they breed, give birth, and raise their pups. Today, there are only a few hundred left, and the milder winters mean that they now rely on man-made dens for breeding and winter protection. Most of France's endemic species come from a French island in the Mediterranean, Corsica. This is where the beautiful Corsican fire salamander lives. It's a boldly patterned amphibian that's restricted to the island's upland forests and cool shaded stream valleys. It looks very similar to the mainland fire salamander that people might be familiar with from continental Europe, but this island species has more fragmented yellow-orange markings. Females give birth to fully developed juveniles rather than free-swimming larvae, which means they don't rely on standing pools the way that many other species of salamander do. In the Arabica Massif of western Georgia, deep inside one of the deepest cave systems on Earth, lives the Crubera springtail. It's a tiny, pale, wingless soil hexapod that was discovered more than a kilometer below the surface in the Crubera Voronia cave system in the Caucasus Mountains. Down there, the temperatures are only a few degrees above freezing. Light never reaches, and the entire ecosystem depends on organic particles that drift down through the cave over time. The Crubera springtail is so specialized for this habitat that it likely never comes to the surface at all, and it holds the record for the deepest living terrestrial animal ever recorded. In Germany's Black Forest lives the Black Forest giant earthworm, a species that can grow over 60 centimeters long. It spends almost all of its time deep in the soil under the spruce and fir forests of the highlands, especially in the southern part of its range, where the soils stay moist and cool. People almost never see it at the surface because it rarely comes up, even during the rain, and most of what we know comes from soil sampling rather than direct observation. This earthworm is so large that when researchers first encountered its burrows, they were mistaken for the tunnels of small mammals. In Greece's northern Sporades, the Skyros wall lizard can be found on the island of Skyros and the tiny offshore islets around it. There are 2 subspecies, with the main island subspecies on Skyros itself, and the other living on the much smaller islets nearby. On those tiny rocks, especially on Piperi, there are fewer predators. As a result, the subspecies of Skyros wall lizards that are living there exhibit island gigantism, growing noticeably larger than the subspecies found on Skyros Island itself. Males can show vivid blue shoulder patches with orange on the throat and flanks, and the lizards are conspicuous, basking on stone walls, seaside rock ledges, and low scrub. In central Hungary grows the Dolomite flax, a wild flax that's tied almost entirely to one limestone outcrop system northwest of Budapest. This region has dry, open dolomite grasslands where the soil is thin, alkaline, and bakes in the summer heat. The plant has delicate lemon-yellow flowers, and its entire known range covers about 100 square kilometers on exposed ridges and slopes. Trampling, quarrying, and woody encroachment are all ongoing pressures on its habitat, and despite a relatively stable population of between 30 and 40,000 plants, it's assessed as critically endangered nationally due to its tiny range. In Iceland's Lake Thingvallavatn lives the Thingvallavatn char, a small dark species that only occurs here. It lives in the shallows, not really going deeper than 10 meters, and it spends its days wedged between rocks, emerging after dusk to graze on snails and other bottom-dwelling invertebrates. Its unique ecology makes it incredibly specialized for this lake environment and allows it to occupy a totally separate niche from the larger and more abundant Arctic char that share the lake with it. On the Italian island of Sardinia lives the Sardinian brook salamander, a small amphibian that lives its entire life in cold interior springs. In these short runs of oxygen-rich water flowing through deeply cut valleys in the island's rugged interior, the species can be found year-round clinging to submerged stones or wedged into narrow cracks in the stream bed. The various populations of the species are naturally fragmented by the mountainous terrain, with each watershed acting like its own little island. In Latvia, a species of parasitic wasp called Platygaster baltica was described in 2021. It's only about a millimeter long, and it targets tiny gull-forming midges in wet coastal grasslands along the Baltic shore. Adults skim low over the vegetation for a brief window in summer, while the larvae develop hidden inside the midge galls. In both Liechtenstein and Lithuania, I couldn't find any endemic species, but in Luxembourg, there's at least one, the leproid Cynarthonia lichen. It's a crustose species found only on shaded sandstone in the Muellertal region. It forms pale, powdery patches on vertical rock walls where the air stays humid and the light is low, especially inside the deeply cut forested ravines that this part of Luxembourg is known for. It was described only recently after lichenologists realized that the populations here didn't fit any described European species, and so far it hasn't been confirmed from anywhere else outside of this very small sandstone landscape. On the island nation of Malta grows the Maltese rock century, a strange, tufted coastal plant that has become the national flower of the country. It forms rounded clumps on exposed limestone cliffs around the island, with thick, fleshy gray-green leaves and pom-pom-like flower heads that sit atop long stalks in late spring. Most of the plants live right on the edge of sea cliffs, where salt spray and harsh wind keep other vegetation down. These cliff faces are difficult to reach, which is one of the main reasons that this species has survived at all. In the more accessible areas, collecting and coastal development eliminated many populations in the past. In Moldova, there's another tiny parasitic wasp called Eons corybus. It was first collected in the Kodri region, where the country's last patches of old broadleaf woodland still cover the central hills. The species develops inside the caterpillars of small moths that tunnel through plant stems and shoots. As a result, it also spends almost its entire life hidden within the plant alongside its host. Monaco only covers about 200 hectares, and as a result, there are no known endemic species in the country. Along the plains north of Podgorica in Montenegro runs the Zeta River, and this is the only place where the Zeta stone loach has ever been found. It's a slender, mottled loach that spends its life in this one drainage, and it was described surprisingly recently after surveys in the early 21st century showed that the Zeta population was measurably distinct from similar loaches elsewhere in the Balkans. Because of its small range, it's assessed as endangered. On the North Sea coast of the Netherlands lives a tiny marine worm called Storm's Protocera neris. It lives in fine sand and shallow water and spends its life threading through the top few centimeters of the seabed. Researchers first identified it while sampling the seafloor, and so far it hasn't been confirmed from anywhere else beyond Dutch waters. It's so small that it can only be detected through core samples and careful sorting in the lab. North Macedonia has a surprising endemic species that was lost for decades. The Vodno bush cricket was first collected in 1954 on Mount Vodno above Skopje, and only 3 specimens were discovered. In the 1960s, a few more specimens were seen, but then it surprisingly disappeared for decades, with even targeted searches failing to rediscover it. It wasn't until 2012 and 2013 that surveys in the municipality of Prilep turned up new populations in the southern extension of the same mountain chain. Those finds showed that the species was still hanging on, but had now apparently centered its population further to the south of where it was originally collected. The Oslo webcap is a rare mushroom that grows in only a few places around the Oslofjord district of Norway. It appears in small numbers under small-leaved linden trees on warm, open slopes with light leaf litter. Surveys have found it at only a handful of sites, and experts think there may be only a few hundred mature mushrooms in total. Its remaining habitat is threatened by development, quarrying, and the spread of planted spruce that makes the soil less suitable for this species. Poland's Upper Silesia is home to a tiny white plant called the Polish scurvy grass. It's a coastal species that no longer lives anywhere near the coast. Its ancestors once grew along an old Baltic shoreline, but as the sea moved north, this plant survived inland in places where the groundwater naturally carries salt to the surface. Today, it hangs on in a handful of salty meadows in the Silesian upland. It's a very small plant with thick, fleshy leaves, and its entire range is limited to just a few sites in southern Poland. Portugal has a high number of endemic species thanks to their inclusion of the Azores archipelago. The Azores noctual is just one of the endemic species of these islands, and the only endemic mammal. It's a small tree-roosting bat that does something unusual. It often hunts in broad daylight. It can be seen hunting insects over fields and forest edges on warm afternoons, especially on the larger islands of the archipelago. It still flies at night like other bats, but daytime foraging is common here and may reflect the fact that the islands don't have a lot of raptors that hunt the bats. Numbers are thought to be just a few thousand across the islands, and the bat now survives in fragmented pockets where old trees and roosts remain. For Ireland, I really wanted to find a species that lives exclusively in the Republic of Ireland, and it turns out that the Killarney shad is confined to just a single lake, Loch Lane in County Kerry. It's a landlocked population of a marine herring relative, and over time it has evolved into a small freshwater plankton feeder that never goes back to the sea. The fish stay mostly mid-water, rising higher in the water column in summer when the zooplankton is concentrated near the surface. Because they only occur in this one lake, their status is extremely precarious, and pressures from nutrient enrichment and changing lake stratification now threaten the tiny population that remains. Central Romania is home to Mayhez's blind mole rat, a fully subterranean rodent of the Transylvanian plains steppe and forest steppe grasslands. It spends its life tunneling through deep soils, and the moles can even talk to each other underground by thumping their heads, which sends vibrations along the burrow walls to other mole rats nearby. Populations have shrunk as prime soils are plowed and deeply tilled, which destroys burrows and the short grass structure this animal needs, and it's now listed as endangered. Russia is huge, but in the southwestern European corner of the country lives Orlov's viper. It's found in the northern foothills of the Caucasus and was only described in 2001. It's restricted to a very small zone of dry, rocky steppe and meadow in Stavropol Krai. Fieldwork has shown that it has a patchy distribution, and is tied to warm, open grassland with scattered scrubs. Because these habitats are rare, their populations are tiny. Agricultural expansion, vineyard development, and scrub change have all squeezed the remaining habitat, and the species is now critically endangered. San Marino is a microstate, fully surrounded by Italy. Because of its size and the fact that it doesn't have any unique habitats, there are no endemic species known from the country. In a single limestone cave in southwestern Serbia lives a newly described cave beetle named after Olympic long jumper Ivana Spanovic. Discovered in Pećina na Djerekarvskom vrelu and described in 2025, this tiny yellow-brown beetle is adapted to permanent darkness and cold, with adults barely reaching 4 millimeters long. So far, no other sites are known, which makes this one cave the only known range of this species. On the ridges and meadow edges of the Wielka Fatra Mountains in Slovakia lives the Fatra bush cricket, a green katydid best known for its duet. Males call with short pulses, and females answer almost instantly, creating a tight back and forth that researchers used to confirm it as a distinct species. It occupies cool, flower-rich mountain grasslands and the dense herb zone where pasture meets woodland, with the type locality at Maline in Wielka Fatra and records centered in the West Carpathians. Described in 2007, it's a highly localized insect whose presence is generally detected by ear rather than by sight. In Slovenia grows the carnelian primrose, a deep pink flower named for the old region of Carniola. It favors cool, shaded regions, especially river gorges, where it roots in narrow ledges and crevices that hardly have any soil. It flowers in early spring, often while the cliffs are still damp from snowmelt, and most of the plants occur in a tight belt of karst country in the west and center of the country. In Spain, on the islands of Ibiza and Formentera, as well as dozens of other tiny offshore rocks, lives the Ibiza wall lizard, and it's famous for its striking color shifts from island to island. Some populations are olive or speckled, while others on the small islets turn a vivid electric blue. The species basks on low stone walls, dunes, and sea cliffs, and in human settlements it can become remarkably tame, darting out for insects or fallen fruit around cafes and courtyards. In recent years, the main island populations on Ibiza have been hit hard by the introduced horseshoe whip snake. Thankfully, the lizards on offshore islets haven't been affected, as the snakes haven't reached them yet. In Sweden, on the island of Gotland, grows the Gotland fumwort, an early spring plant that pops up in April and is often withered away by the end of May. It favors half shade, often growing along walls, under shrubs, and in grazed pastures. Bumblebees do most of the pollinating, and the majority of their seed dispersal is done by ants that carry their seeds a short distance, so the plant tends to stay clustered in tiny patches. In Switzerland's Lake Zurich, there lives a corriganid fish known as the Zurich whitefish. It's a slim, silvery, deep-water whitefish that was only described in 2015 after detailed genetic and morphological work revealed that what people once lumped as a single, widespread species was actually multiple distinct species, each living in separate lakes. The Zurich whitefish is tied to the cooler, deeper zones of Lake Zurich, often in water tens of meters below the surface. Because it's limited entirely to this single lake and is sensitive to warming and changes in nutrient levels, it's considered highly vulnerable to extinction. In eastern Turkey lives the Anatolia newt, a boldly patterned salamander that inhabits the Taurus Mountains. It breeds in clear upland waters in spring, where males develop intense black and yellow banding and swollen tails. Then, outside the breeding season, the adults move back into nearby rocky forest and steppe. Its populations are naturally patchy because each spring system sits in its own valley, and the newt does not disperse easily between these valleys. The species also has several distinct regional forms, and some researchers think that more than one species may be hidden within what we currently call the Anatolia newt. In western Ukraine's Podolian uplands lives the Podolsk blind mole rat, a burrowing rodent specialized for the deep soils above the Dniester basin. It was only separated taxonomically from neighboring blind mole rat species in the last decade, after chromosomal work proved that they were distinct. The species occupies the few remaining pockets of old steppe turf that are now embedded inside an almost continuous matrix of wheat, orchards, and sunflower fields. The species hangs on only in these isolated colonies, strung along unplowed margins of fields, railway verges, and cemetery grasslands. The Scottish crossbill is the only bird species found exclusively in the United Kingdom. It lives in the pine woods of the Scottish Highlands, where it feeds by prying open cone scales to reach the seeds of Scots pine, lodgepole pine, and spruce. For decades, it was tangled up taxonomically with the common and parrot crossbills, and they overlap in the same forests, which made it hard to tell them apart in the field. The breakthrough came when researchers showed that Scottish crossbills have their own distinct call types and bill proportions that match the specific cone sizes in the highlands. Its breeding success is tied to how much seed the pines produce. So in some years, they barely breed at all, while in good cone years, they nest early and can rear multiple broods. The last country alphabetically in Europe is also the smallest on Earth, Vatican City, and as you can imagine, there are no species known to be endemic to this tiny piece of land in the center of Rome. And that's it for this week's video. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. I need to say a special thanks to my patrons. Without their ongoing support, I wouldn't be able to make a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.